I walked in on my brother and fiancée in her bed just 2 months before our wedding. She chose him, married him when she got pregnant, but now he's gone, and somehow I'm the one expected to fix their mess. 3 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and at the time I was engaged to Madison Rivers, a woman I had spent nearly 5 years building a life with. We were both attorneys, ambitious and thriving in our careers, balancing our fast-paced lives with moments of genuine connection. Madison wasn't just my fiancée, she was my best friend, my future, my everything. Our relationship had always been built on mutual respect, trust, and shared aspirations. We had our routines, Saturday morning coffee at our favorite spot, spontaneous road trips when our schedules allowed, and nights spent discussing our cases, each of us challenging the other to think differently. Madison had this infectious energy, the kind that could light up a room, and for years, I believed that no matter how chaotic life became, we would always have each other to lean on. I had grown up in the shadow of my younger brother, Ryan Caldwell. While I was the responsible, career-driven older sibling, Ryan was the reckless free spirit who never took life too seriously. He was charming, unpredictable, and had a way of getting away with things most people wouldn't dare attempt. Despite our differences, I had always looked out for him. I covered for him when he skipped classes, bailed him out of trouble, and even helped him secure internships he didn't deserve. Looking back, maybe I had been enabling him all along. Even though Ryan and I were opposites, I never doubted that he cared about me in his own way. He had always been the life of the party, the one who could walk into a room and immediately become the center of attention. It wasn't that I resented him for it, I had my own successes, my own achievements. But there was always this unspoken expectation that I would be the one to clean up after him, to make sure he landed on his feet when he inevitably stumbled. It was a dynamic I had grown used to, something I had never questioned. Until later, Madison and I had planned our wedding for early spring. It was supposed to be the happiest time of our lives. We had already booked the venue, sent out invitations, and carefully chosen every detail. Madison had spent months deciding on the perfect dress, and I had watched her excitement build with each passing day. Every conversation we had about the wedding was filled with anticipation for the life we were about to begin together. I can still remember the way she looked at me during those moments. Full of love, full of certainty. It was the kind of look that made me believe without a doubt that we were meant to be. There were nights we would stay up late just imagining our future together, the house we would buy, the family we would build, the years of memories we would create side by side. I had never felt so sure about anything in my life. But certainty, as I would soon learn, is fragile. And just 2 months before the big day, my world came crashing down in ways I never could have imagined. Madison had always been ambitious, the kind of person who threw herself completely into her work, chasing success with a relentless determination. That's one of the things I admired most about her, her drive, her discipline, her unwillingness to settle for anything less than excellence. But that same intensity made her vulnerable to failure in a way she never quite learned to handle. When she lost her job, she tried to play it off as nothing more than a temporary setback. She didn't give me many details, just that it had been a misunderstanding and that her firm had overreacted. But I could see the cracks forming. The way she avoided eye contact when she told me. The way her hands fidgeted, restless, as if trying to grasp at something solid. Madison had always been composed, always in control. But in the days that followed, she seemed lost, unmoored. I did my best to reassure her, to remind her that we were a team, that we would get through this together. I told her she didn't need to rush into anything, that she could take the time she needed to figure things out. But she hated being idle. She needed something, anything, to occupy her mind, to fill the void that losing her job had left behind. That's when she found pottery. It was something she had always talked about trying but never had the time for. Now, with no job and plenty of free hours, she decided to enroll in a local class. First, I was happy for her. It seemed like a harmless hobby, something that might help her regain a sense of purpose. She would come home covered in clay, talking about different techniques, excited in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. It was a relief to see her smile again. But what I didn't know, what I never could have anticipated, was that Ryan was taking those same classes. I don't remember the exact moment I realized something felt off. Maybe it was when she started mentioning Ryan more often, slipping his name into casual conversation in a way she never had before. At first, I didn't think much of it. Ryan had always been the kind of guy who made people laugh, who could charm his way into any group. Maybe he was just keeping her company. Maybe he was helping her feel like herself again. But then it became more than that. Started small. Ryan offering to pick her up from class, dropping her off afterward. A text here, comment there. Then suddenly there were inside jokes I wasn't a part of, references I didn't understand. They were spending more and more time together. Not just in class, but outside of it. Trips to new restaurants, museum visits, weekend outings. Things that, once upon a time, had been ours. I told myself it was nothing. I wanted to believe that it was nothing. Madison had never given me a reason to doubt her before. And Ryan, despite all his flaws, was still my brother. But the unease settled in deep in my gut, a slow-growing rot that I couldn't ignore. I started noticing little things. The way Madison would put her phone face down whenever I walked into the room. The way she seemed more distant, more distracted. The way she started canceling plans with me, making excuses about being too tired, too busy, too overwhelmed. One evening I finally worked up the courage to ask her about it. She laughed, shaking her head, telling me I was being paranoid. "Ryan is like a little brother to me," she said. "You're overthinking this." I wanted to believe her. So I did. Until the night I came home early. I was supposed to be out of town on a business trip, but a last-minute change brought me home a day early. The thought of surprising Madison had me smiling as I pulled into the driveway. But that smile faded the moment I saw Ryan's car parked outside. My stomach clenched. It was past 9 p.m. There was no reason for him to be there. The air felt heavy as I stepped out of the car. An unshakable tension pressing against my chest. The house was dark, save for the dim glow coming from the living room window. My hand hovered over the doorknob for a brief second before I turned it and stepped inside. The first thing I heard was laughter, hers and his, mingling together. Light and carefree in a way that sent a chill down my spine. It was a sound I used to love, but now in this moment it felt like a blade twisting between my ribs. The living room was a mess. Beer bottles scattered across the floor, the faint scent of alcohol and sweat lingering in the air. The television flickered, casting erratic shadows across the walls. A jacket Ryan's was draped over the back of the couch. It was all wrong. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I moved down the hallway, my steps slow, deliberate. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar. A sliver of warm light spilled onto the carpet. I already knew what I was about to see, but I pushed the door open anyway. There they were, tangled in each other, completely unaware of my presence. The sheets I had slept in, the bed we had shared, it was now theirs. My breath hitched. My vision blurred at the edges. But I didn't look away. A part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, but another part, the part that already knew there were no answers that would ever be enough, stayed silent. A cold, numbing clarity settled over me. I stepped forward, my body moving before my mind could catch up. Ryan's back was turned to me, but Madison's eyes shot open the second she sensed another presence in the room. The shift in her face, from pleasure to sheer terror, was almost satisfying. Almost. I grabbed Ryan by the collar, yanking him off the bed with a force I didn't even know I had. His body hit the floor hard, a startled yelp escaping his lips as he scrambled to make sense of what was happening. But I didn't give him a chance. My fist met his face with a sickening crunch, the impact sending a sharp pain up my knuckles, but I barely felt it. Ryan groaned, his hands weakly coming up in a pathetic attempt to shield himself. But I hit him again, and again. Madison was screaming now, her voice cracking as she pleaded with me to stop. I barely registered her words. My focus was on Ryan, on the betrayal that had been festering beneath my nose for God knows how long. I could feel my breath coming fast, ragged, my entire body shaking with an anger so raw, so visceral that it frightened even me. Blood dripped from Ryan's nose, staining his shirt in dark, ugly splotches. He wasn't fighting back. He never did. He had always been the type to manipulate his way out of consequences, to charm his way into forgiveness. But there was no charming his way out of this. I finally let go, shoving him backward. He hit the edge of the nightstand, knocking over a lamp that crashed to the floor. For a moment, the only sound in the room was our heavy breathing. Then I turned to Madison. She was clutching the sheets to her chest, her face streaked with tears, her lips trembling as she tried to form words. Words that didn't matter. "Get out," I said, my voice eerily calm. She shook her head, whispering something about how it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. How she never meant to hurt me. But all I could see was her tangled up in my brother. In the life I thought was ours. "You have 10 minutes, I said flatly. "If you're still here after that, I'll throw you out myself." She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for something, remorse, forgiveness, anything. But I had nothing left to give. I had spent years loving her, trusting her, building a life with her. And in return, she had burned it to the ground. I reached down, grabbed her hand and slid the engagement ring off her finger. She gasped as if the gesture hurt more than my words, as if she had expected me to fight for her, to beg her to stay. But I was done fighting. She gathered her things with trembling hands, stuffing clothes into a bag in hurried, desperate motions. She was crying, but I felt nothing. Not sadness. Not rage. Just emptiness. Ryan hadn't moved from where he had slumped against the nightstand. He was still breathing heavily, his face swollen, his expression unreadable. I could have hit him again. I could have broken him the way he had broken my trust. But instead, I turned and walked away. As the front door shut behind Madison for the last time, the silence that followed was deafening. I stood there for a long time staring at the empty hallway, the space where she had once been. I had always thought heartbreak would feel like pain, like agony. But in that moment, it felt like nothing at all. The days that followed were a haze of fury and disbelief. Sleep eluded me, my thoughts a tangled mess of betrayal and unanswered questions. My fists still ached from the impact of hitting Ryan, but the pain was a welcome distraction from the storm raging inside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Madison wrapped around him. The sheets we had once shared now tangled with someone else's deceit. My parents, predictably, tried to mediate as if this could be salvaged with apologies and empty words. My mother, ever the defender of Ryan, insisted that I talk it out with him as though this was some petty sibling argument over a borrowed jacket, not the complete and utter dismantling of my life. She didn't see it as betrayal, just a mistake. One that, in her mind, could be forgiven with time and understanding. My father was more restrained, but his silence spoke volumes. He saw the pain in my eyes, the devastation, yet he still hesitated to take a firm stance. Perhaps he thought that by staying neutral he was helping. But his neutrality felt like another betrayal. It confirmed what I had always known but never wanted to admit: Ryan would always be the golden child in their eyes. No matter what he did, no matter how deeply he cut those around him, he would always have their unconditional support. I stopped answering my mother's calls, stopped replying to texts. I couldn't stomach hearing her try to justify what had happened. Couldn't bear to listen to her attempt to smooth over the wreckage as if my life wasn't burning down around me. I was already drowning in my own fury. I didn't need her pouring more fuel onto the fire. Then, 2 weeks later, the final blow came. Madison was pregnant, and Ryan was the father. I found out through my mother, of course. She left a voicemail, her voice light, almost excited, as though this was some joyous family announcement instead of a twisted reminder of my own humiliation. She had the audacity to tell me that I should be happy for them, that sometimes things work out in unexpected ways. I nearly threw my phone against the wall. I could picture them together. Madison with that guilty, hopeful look in her eyes. Ryan with his signature smirk, convinced that everything would fall into place for him like it always did. Did he even feel remorse? Did he ever lose sleep over what he had done, or did he simply see it as another situation he had navigated his way out of? The thought of them playing house, of them starting a family built on lies and betrayal, made my stomach turn. They got married quietly. I wasn't invited. I wouldn't have gone anyway. There was nothing left for me here. Every street, every familiar face, every corner of the city felt tainted, suffocating. The memories I had built with Madison, weekend getaways, late-night conversations, whispered dreams of the future, they were all nothing now. Ghosts of a life that had never truly been mine to begin with. So I packed. I didn't give my parents a grand explanation. I didn't tell them where I was going. I just left. I took what I needed, sold what I didn't, and drove until the city that had been my home was nothing more than a distant blur in my rearview mirror. I didn't stop until the weight in my chest loosened, until I could breathe without feeling like my lungs were full of smoke. I needed distance. I needed to start over. And I swore to myself I would never look back. 3 years passed. 3 years of silence, of carefully constructing a life where the past could no longer reach me. I had severed ties, deleted contacts, and ensured that the people I once called family no longer had any access to me. My phone number was private, my social media accounts non-existent. I had no desire to look back. No reason to revisit a life that had already burned to the ground. But the past has a way of finding you, no matter how far you run. It was a quiet evening when my doorbell rang. At first, I ignored it. No one ever came to my door unannounced. My life had been designed to prevent unexpected visits. But the ringing persisted, an insistent chime that refused to be ignored. When I finally opened the door, the sight before me felt like a punch to the gut. Madison stood there, clutching the hand of a small child. She looked nothing like the woman I once knew. The years had worn her down, stripped her of the effortless confidence she used to carry. Her face was thinner, her skin paler. Dark circles framed her eyes, filled with a weight I had never seen before. Whatever had happened since we last saw each other had drained the life out of her. But it was the child who caught my attention. A little girl, no older than 3, with wide eyes filled with confusion. She clung to Madison's leg, peeking up at me with a wary curiosity, as if trying to understand who I was and why she was here. I didn't have to ask. I already knew. Ryan had abandoned them. I felt nothing at first. No sympathy, no shock, just a cold detachment. as if I were watching someone else's life unfold. Of course Ryan had left. Of course he had run the moment responsibility became real. It was what he had always done. And yet, somehow, my mother had the audacity to send her to me, expecting me to pick up the pieces of the mess her beloved son had left behind. I wanted to slam the door in her face. I should have. But then I looked at the child again. My niece. She was innocent in all of this. She didn't choose to be born into this chaos. She had done nothing to deserve being abandoned. Being dragged to the doorstep of a man who wanted nothing to do with the people responsible for ruining his life. For the first time in years, I felt something other than anger. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't understanding. But it was something. I took a deep breath, exhaling the ghosts of a past I thought I had buried. And then, against every instinct screaming at me to turn them away, I stepped aside and let them in. I let them in. Not because I forgave Madison, not because I had found some hidden reserve of sympathy, but because a child should never have to suffer for the sins of their parents. Whatever anger still burned inside me wasn't meant for the innocent little girl clutching at the hem of Madison's worn-out coat. It wasn't her fault that the world she was born into was built on lies and betrayal. Madison sat across from me, her shoulders hunched, her hands gripping the fabric of her sleeves as if holding herself together. She told me everything, how Ryan had charmed her into believing that what they had was real, how he had sworn he would take care of her, how he had promised her a life that never existed beyond the fantasies he spun so easily. Then, one day he simply left. No explanation, no warning, just a few words muttered over his shoulder before he disappeared from their lives entirely. I listened in silence, my face unreadable as she unraveled the wreckage of her choices in front of me. I heard the desperation in her voice, the regret laced through every syllable. But regret wasn't redemption and desperation wasn't an excuse. She wanted help. She wanted a lifeline. But she wouldn't find it here. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and grabbed the small envelope of cash I kept for emergencies. When I handed it to her, the weight of it felt strangely insignificant in my palm. This should get you through for a while, I said, my voice even detached. Find a lawyer. File for child support. Whatever happens next, make sure Ryan is held accountable for what he's done. But don't contact me again. Her lip trembled. Tears filled her eyes, spilling over as she reached for my arm. But I stepped back before she could touch me. There was nothing left between us. No anger. No love. Just an empty space where something had once been. She begged. She pleaded. Said she had nowhere else to go. That she had no one left. But I had nothing left to give. The little girl clung to her mother's leg, confused by the tension in the room. Too young to understand the weight of the moment. I crouched down, met her wide eyes, and for the first time I let myself feel something, not for Madison, not for Ryan, but for her. She deserved better. Better than them. Better than me. Take care of her, I said quietly. And then I turned away. The door closed behind them, the sound ringing through the empty space like the final note of a song that had gone on too long. I stood there, staring at the door, waiting for something to rise in me. Relief, satisfaction, anything. But there was only silence and the quiet realization that this was how it was always meant to end. Some betrayals can't be undone. Some wounds never heal. But moving on, that at least, was a choice. And I had finally made mine. This story serves as a harsh reminder that not all wounds can heal, and not everyone who enters our lives is meant to stay. Sometimes, the only way to truly move forward is to let go of what once broke us. Remember, betrayal does not define you, how you rise from it does. Life can be cruel, but it also gives us the power to choose. Dwell in the past or step beyond it to build something new. What are your thoughts on this story? Is it a tale of liberation, tragedy, or a lesson we can all learn from? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to continue this journey through more thought-provoking stories, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next.